What is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. That is what's happening in our current financial system. So I thought it would be great to do a financial systems one-on-one to help people understand, help my audience understand how financial systems are built and that it's not magic. Like, it's very predictable engineering. Let's get into it. This episode is brought to you by Stonehill Wealth Management, where we help our clients invest money into the future. We're doing this in a Q&A format. Let's get to the first question. What actually makes a financial system strong, and what happens when the money itself breaks? All right, so the core idea, and we'll take it out of the financial world and we'll just take it into multiple domains, because systems all work really the same way, whether it's a biological system, an atomic system, the solar system, and a financial system, right? And they all are sort of built on, let's call it three things, with a fourth thing that you can actually see in a financial system. So it's energy flow, circulation, and scarcity, right? And in a financial system, right, the other factor is like trust. And so you need those components to build a solid system. So let's look at scarcity, right? Why scarcity is important. Scarcity, if you relate it to the solar system, is like the equivalent to gravity, right? You need something that anchors everything for the system, and scarcity does that, right? Circulation is obvious in solar systems, right? The spin of everything. But in the financial system, it's circulation of the money, right? You need, the faster the circulation, right, the more power, right? The energy is like I just think of money as energy, right? So money is the energy, and it's embedded in the scarcity and circulation, right? They're not separate. So money is the energy, and then trust, right? People need to trust it, right? It needs to be, and the trust really comes from how well the system flows and creates wealth naturally. Let's go to question number 2. How have financial systems evolved over time from gold to fiat, which is government money, to Bitcoin? And what does each era say about what we value? So I was talking with a friend earlier and just talking about a deep dive in a study going into ancient, like, cultures, mathematics, science, right? What they call magic. And magic is just the understanding of, like, the invisible and how it works, right? So in ancient times they would call maybe even math to a certain degree magic. We use Wi-Fi and internet and things that we can't see and harness that power. That's magic. Gravity would be another form of magic, but it's like the invisible forces that operate the universe, right? And all these invisible forces, when you learn math, you learn to be able to track and monitor, like, the magic, right? And so the modern financial system that brought the current European age out of the dark ages was built on, like, mirroring, like, nature's magic and math into humans' systems, right? Meaning, like, gold. When you look at gold and its properties, right? The first part of gold is there had to be, like, a star that explodes in our vicinity that embeds that substance into the earth. Meaning, like, that's a very scarce situation. For that to happen again, right, we probably wouldn't live through it, right? So it's a scarce situation that put gold on the planet, right? And that's nature created scarcity, right? And then you look at pulling gold out of the ground, right? Gold is very difficult to pull out of the ground. It requires energy. And without boring you with the super nerd details, over a long period of time, you can only pull out about 1 to 2% of the gold out per year, right? When you average it out over time, right? And then you mirror that with human productivity, right? Human productivity grows at about 1 to 2% a year, right? So those things match, and so you can imagine the ancient alchemists, magicians, scientists, whatever you want to call them, right? They understood the properties of gold, and they were like, okay, gold is a very good nature-based scarcity form of money that can allow us to anchor a financial system that won't allow human biases to like mess things up, right? Because that's the important part. Whenever you involve humans, right? You know, humans need an anchor to not like mess things up, or said a different way, like if the planets and everything in the solar system didn't have the sun to anchor them, they'll sort of just float around haphazardly, right? And it would be almost impossible for life to form without that gravity center, right? So you needed the gold to anchor a financial system, right? And then what the humans were able to do, once you anchored a system in natural math, right? They discovered that. Then you had 1700s, us develop trade routes with ships and everything, and we use military to protect those trade routes to allow the circulation of the money, right? So now we created trade. We had the anchor, um, um, you know, um, and we had the circulation with the trade routes that allowed us to flow money around the world. And again, the faster the flow of money, the more wealth can be generated, right? And that's why you had, that's what pulled the current European civilization out of the Dark Ages, right? And around the 1700s, maybe 1600s, mid 1600s to 1700s was when you really begin to see like advances in European civilization, right? Then you move to the 1800s, and we had a industrial gold standard, right? So we picked up the velocity of money. I would imagine part of that was the invention. I think it was the 1700s where we invented a ledger system for, I forget the technical name for it, but it was a ledger system for tracking who owned what, right? But it's basically like the basis for modern banking, right? Which allowed us to create bonds and paper currency, which allowed the circulation of money to move faster, meaning like you didn't have to circulate gold anymore, right? Because that was clunky and expensive. You can just circulate paper money around the world faster. And the bankers were like the bookkeepers, and they built networks, right? That's when you get where you had like the and I'm drawing a blank on like the bankers of our folklore that are the dynasties of like wealthy scions today, but they were the early bookkeepers, that they would have the gold and they would circulate paper currency and bonds around the world fast through their banking network, which increased the flow of wealth around the world, right? So and built the industrial age, right? So then the next age, right, was the 1900s, where when we invented, we sort of got a little carried away, and fiat money, or government money, which is money not backed by nature's math, meaning like we pulled away from the gold standard, and we just so we had like fake scarcity because we took out the gold and we replaced it with fiat money, which can be manipulated. And then we had the financialization of everything, right? And I can probably do a whole episode on that, but the point is you have fake scarcity, and then you sort of have fake velocity because of the ability to financialize things and manipulate the money. So like, financialization is using manipulation to force insurance companies, banks, mutual fund companies to buy government debt to make it valuable, right? And there's all kind of regulations and rules set up to do that. That's still in place, but it's no it's no mistake, might be the right word, or it's no coincidence that we started getting very unstable financial systems in the 1900s because of the pulling out of nature math and in inserting like fiat money, right? And again, you look at the term fiat. Fiat sort of, I think it means like declaration, right? It's just money that is scarce because the government declares it, um, and so that's just not something that's sustainable, right? I you know, you my audience would like to go back to ancient religious texts because those texts out, you don't even have to like believe in like the religion, but I just mean like the ancient wisdom uh, gives you insight into when they said the story of Tower of Babel, where mankind used their technology to try to build a tower to the sky of God, and that didn't work out, right? Because every time we try and do this, um, it doesn't work out, right? So we tend to start with a divine idea and build on top of it. Then we subtract out the divinity and try to build without that, and then it crumbles, i.e., the current financial system. Thanks, Steve. Steve gave me the correct definition of fiat, which is a formal authorization or proposition, a decree, right? Um, so let's move to the 2000s, right? In the 2000s is a return to blending the spirit with science, right? Or natural math, right? With man-made technology, i.e. Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoin allowed us to create like real scarcity in digital format with the velocity of the internet. And before Bitcoin, like that was the problem. Like we were like, how do we build scarcity into a digital system naturally? And that's what Bitcoin allowed with tying, limiting Bitcoin to only going to be 21 million, to creating the mining system where the only way that it works is for them to purchase actual power, right? Which anchored the money to natural laws, very similar to gold, where it required power or proof of work to pull it from the ground. And so Bitcoin solved that problem. And so when you look at Bitcoin as a money, right, Bitcoin is a more powerful money than gold because it's anchored to nature, so more scarce than gold, right, with the velocity of the internet. And when you look at the speed of trade on the internet, like the speed of trade in the 1700s required ships. The speed of trade in the industrial age brought in airplanes, railroads, cars, those things. The speed of trade on the internet is like the level of fastness I can't even describe, because it's like I can trade money and things with somebody anywhere in the world like that. When before the internet, like it would take weeks and days or months, right? And so like the power of Bitcoin as a money, I don't think the world fully understands it like the Bitcoiners do. And some of these corporations getting into it early do, but like the world just doesn't understand it. Like it's going to pull us out of the because dark ages are relative, right? But it's pulling us out of the modern day dark ages into a way better society, right? And the trust is big because trust in the old system is just non-existent. This new system is easy to trust because it's just math and code, right? There are no humans in the middle playing political games, right? It's just math and code, and you can opt in or opt out as you want it. Let's go to question number 3. Why did productive real estate and stocks become the go-to assets for wealth in the 1900s? And are they still real anchors today? So one of the things, one of my favorite other quotes from the Bible is be in the world, but not of the world, right? And so when you learn about wealthy families, what they understand is there's always going to be certain modern technologies that control freaks use to control and manipulate and bend the universe to their will, right? That's just a staple of the free will of humans, right? You're always going to have what we would call like a colonizer, right, or a conqueror, right? The name changes, but you know, in DC Comics they call him Vandal Savage, right? But you always got that character, right? The conqueror, the colonizer, and they're gonna use modern knowledge and technology to try to bend everything to their will. However, if you understand um, the spirit of money, right, you can always do things to protect your money. And so, like when the world went from a gold-based financial system, and gold was like slower to move around the world. So gold again lost its power to underpin a system because it was slower in the age of the industrial age where we can move paper money and digital money faster than gold. Then what ended up happening was rich people began to say, okay, cool. Now, since we're not really anchored to gold, let me go find the economic centers that have the most trade, right? So you think of like you look at um, real estate in Manhattan, in downtown, which is in Manhattan. You look at real estate in San Francisco. You look at real estate in Tokyo, Paris, London, right? It's very expensive, right? Because there's lots, so it's because it's scarce and there's lots of trade done in those areas, right? Very fast circulation of money in those areas. Then you look at the stock market, right? You look at the 1900s. The U.S. stock market was the most scarce because our money was the global reserve currency. So it was the anchor for global trade. And then our corporations did the most trade, right? So the S&P 500 represents those things. So S&P 500 or U.S. stocks had very fast circulation of trade, and it was anchored to the most scarce financial system because of the financial system for the world, right? Now, again, a lot of it was manipulation, blah, 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 but the physics are the physics, right? And so a intelligent person who understood the physics of money, they would say, all right, what companies are, uh, leading the industrial era, and it was probably better to own shares of those companies. You might think of like a Standard Oil, which owned properties, and you can own shares of an industrial corporation that was leading the charge of the industrial age. That was a way better investment than just owning gold, right? Because it was high velocity money, backed by the scarcity of an industrial powerhouse, right? And you can literally, and I use the Standard Oil because you can literally track Standard Oil as it got split up. But Standard Oil was the underpinning of wealth um, for like the big oil countries today, right? All of them, right? Their executives and know-how was embedded in Texas's oil boom, right? The money made it here. They were into everything, right? And so you don't if you can read what they call the tea leaves, right, and you understand like the spirit of money, then you can go, okay, cool. All I need is scarcity and velocity, right? And I can apply that to like a money, or or uh, or I can apply it to a system. And if you understand systems, then you can move in and out of like the money that is scarce and fast into different forms like shares and real estate in a certain area. And that's going to tie into my next question. But stocks and real estate are still anchors today, but you got to make sure you evolve with the system, meaning like I think shares in a Bitcoin treasury company that is executing a really good strategy is going to provide a better yield than Bitcoin, right? I don't think shares in something like McDonald's, right, is going to be is going to attract high velocity. It's not going to move very fast. It's not going to be very scarce, right? But I think again, shares in I use MSTR, MicroStrategy, or strategy stock, right? When you look at what they're doing, they own almost 600,000 Bitcoin, right? They're in a league of their own, and they're innovating in new finance, right? Meaning they got a big moat, very scarce value proposition built on top of money that is very scarce, right? And that's going to be a stock to watch, right, for the next decade, right? So you guys who listen to the podcast know that I own it. Not investment advice, but I'm just giving you an example of how you can like follow the pattern and understand like the flow of systems being built on top of a good anchor system, right? And then we go to real estate. I think when you look into data centers and all the data that needs to be stored for the modern digital age, and then you understand like the technology of data systems, where let's say you get a space for a data center, and as technology advances, that space can contain more data, and you'll be able to charge more for more data, and just the math on that gets exponential on like how much money you can make in an area that like Texas, for example, that's attracting lots of corporations and money because of our property rights. Like Texas is becoming more and more scarce because New York's going crazy, right, electing socialists. California's going crazy. Texas is still very attractive to wealth and money. And then you combine that with it embracing new technologies, and you go, oh, so owning Texas real estate and owning real estate that's productive in the modern era is going to be a very attractive place to store wealth in the modern day society, right? And I'm explaining that because you don't have to just move into Bitcoin, right? You can play the same games, but understanding the system and understanding where the money is naturally going to flow to. Number 4, why does the current system feel unstable to so many people, and what would a system look like that actually respects value, time, and energy? Well, the system is unstable because it was built on just, I call it unstable magic, right? It's just declaration, fiat currency. I declare this is valuable, right? But that is not like something that is sustainable because it's not built on anything real, right? Meaning like, you take banking. Banking is in the modern way banking is done, it's very unproductive, super unproductive. Like we can, and I say this routinely, like we can eliminate 90% of the employees at banks, right, and still run a very good system. Right? We don't need banks in the current form the way that they're built. They don't protect our data and information. They're not even really lending productively. It's expensive. It's clunky. They're just a terrible. In the current form, just a not good organization, right? And again, I got a lot of friends who are bankers, so like, not the people are great. I'm just saying like the organization is very outdated and needed to be updated. But bankers for the last since '08 are still making tons and tons of money. I'm talking about like the not the neighborhood banks. I'm talking like the bankers, right? The Wall Street bankers, like they're making crazy money, right? And it's because the system rewards those who are closer to the money. And that just becomes people are noticing it, going, that looks unfair. So when something, even if you don't understand the inner workings of a system and you see it, you go, yeah, I just don't trust the system because it doesn't make any sense. It's kind of like education. You go, all right, I'm supposed to go to school, get good grades, go to college, and I can come out getting a job. And people are doing that and coming out just not able to get a job that pays well. Can't even buy a house. All right, you go, okay, that system is dying. I don't have to understand all the inner workings of it. I just know that shit ain't working, And so that's what's happening with the current system. You see like bankers who are very unproductive, not really doing much for society, making all this money. And then you see teachers and other people who are doing noble things, not making a lot of money. Regular people who can't afford the homes. And you go, I don't understand the details, but this just ain't working for me. I'm going to try to do something new, right? And so that's why I feel so unstable, because the results are unstable. Like, the results make no sense. They make no sense to me, and I understand finance, right? So, like, it's just a trash, terrible system. And at the same time, people are noticing people that are saving and building in Bitcoin, and they're getting richer. And the value of a house is coming down for those people, right? And just over time, like, humans are very intelligent, right? The spell of the magicians of fiat money gets broken once they go, all right, my friend over here, he or she did this route, and they're good. I think I'm gonna go over here. And as more people go over here and more people leave this system, it just becomes a natural rebuilding of it. It's kind of like whenever taxis first came out. At first we were afraid to take an Uber because it was weird, right? Then slowly over time, like, you look up now, who still rides in a taxi? Like, nobody, right? It crushed that system. And that's just what's going to happen with the fiat system, right? And so Bitcoin is literally, everything's getting built on top of Bitcoin, right? Like, that's, if that statement, if you think that I said that statement and you think that that is a false thing, I think you should do some homework, because what I'm saying is, like, true, like, like more than true, like, it's happening now. And the slower you do your homework to realize that, the more energy you're going to lose to the old system that is sucking your energy dry, because it's just broke. Like, in order for it to work, they got to pass these big, beautiful bullshit bills, right? That's designed to just create more inflation and suck more money from savers who save in the bullshit assets of that old system. Number 5, if Bitcoin really is a new financial universe, how do we participate in it without getting pulled back into a collapsing one, right? And this is really the core idea that I'm wanting to teach, is like financial literacy. Like, when I say, when you learn to speak the language of money, right? The language of money is like universal, right? The formula I'm telling you, or I'm sharing with you, is like, said simply, the power of money equals the scarcity multiplied by the velocity, right? I think I said it before. Einstein called it E equals MC squared, right? Energy equals basically like the density of the mass, which is scarcity, times the velocity, right? It's the same formula. That's why I say all systems work the same way, right? So, like, the power of money is the scarcity times the velocity. Once you understand that language, then you can just apply it to, like, every form of money, right? You can apply it to real estate, apply it to stocks, apply it to Bitcoin, which is a base currency for a new system. And if you took that knowledge and then you time traveled forward, backward, lateral, which is like different countries in the current time, right? But you maintained that understanding, you would be rich in every location, right? Across space and time. If you can understand that, if you go to prison, you go, all right, I understand the formula. Scarcity times velocity, right? What in this area, what circulates the most? What's traded the most, and what's the most scarce? All right, if I can own that, I'm gonna be rich relative to, right, my location. And so, like, that is the key, is understanding that formula and taking ownership of it, because everybody wants to have a king, right? Everybody wants, tell me what to do, right? So that, and secretly, so that if I'm wrong, I can blame you, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, personal responsibility is something that like people just don't want to own. They want somebody to blame, or they want somebody to save them, right? That world is over, because that was an illusion in the first place, right? The illusion of working somewhere for 40 years and having security, right? Following this linear path of going to college and getting getting this degree to make money is an illusion, right? Saving into my 401k, and the funds that they select for me and being able to retire, that's an illusion. Like, how many people do you know actually like retired from a 401k? I've been in this business for 20 years. There's very few that saved enough money in a 401k and earned enough to be able to retire comfortably, right? I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying they built that system on bullshit money. You know what I mean? And so, like you got to think for yourself, right? Like, and if you don't think for yourself, the system is going to think for you, and the system is extractive. Like, any system that thinks for you is going to be extractive, right? Especially the older and more outdated the system, it's going to extract more energy. But if you build on a system that is self-sovereign, right, where you take personal responsibility, right, that's how you get rich, right? And then you don't have to worry about somebody taking advantage of you because you're fully aware of what's going on. The downside is when you take an L, it's your fault, and you gotta you gotta understand that. But it allows for like real learning, right? Like when you the beauty of sales or entrepreneurship or anything that requires you like to meet yourself, right? It's like you don't have a salary. So like you have to learn to talk to people. You have to learn to be magnetic, right? You have to learn to listen. You have to learn to communicate. You have to learn to bring value. Because if you don't do those things, you don't materialize money into your bank account, right? You don't take invisible energy and turn it into physical reality because you don't have some false illusion depositing money into your account. And I'm not disrespecting anybody who's an employee. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is personal responsibility like teaches you how to do magic. You know what I'm saying? Like for real, teaches you how to align your energy to express what you want to express in life. And you own your power versus giving it to a politician or your manager or your CEO. So Bitcoin is an idea that represents self-sovereign money, and those who are attracted to it are ones who are attracted to personal responsibility, right? It's why I think you're going to see in the world of bifurcation. You're going to see people that are like, nah, I don't want to be personally responsible. I want a king. And they're going to get sucked into new systems that are built on the crypto rails, but are just as extractive, right? You just won't see it initially, and they'll get poor, right? People wonder, how do populations get trapped into a dictatorship like North Korea in 2025, right? How did they get there? Because the ancestors of the people that were attracted to an emperor or a dictator wanted somebody to save them. And I'm saying that like it sounds like I'm being an asshole. I'm not being an asshole. I understand they didn't want to do that, but I'm talking about their energy aligned with wanting to be saved. And when that happens, you got to live with the consequences of your responsibility. If you were attracted to like a place with no king, right, then you would have attracted to America, right? And it was lawless, it was ruthless, they were reckless in the beginning of America, but it was a more free state, right, where you got to live with your consequences, right? The internet is the next evolution of that. The internet now allows everybody around the world to compete in a law, there's a free floating, non-restrictive state that moves very fast and allows for lots of wealth to be built, and Bitcoin is the money for it. So if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification button. Be fruitful and go multiply your money.
Philip Washington Jr. is a registered investment advisor. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor and/or tax professional before implementing any strategy discussed herein. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.